Hello, everybody, and a very happy Blitzmas to you, Mr. Craig.
Ho, ho, ho. Nice to see you. We haven't decorated the house yet, so I thought I'd decorate myself.
Well, you have decorated yourself. You look resplendent. I think you look sort of a mix between a Christmas tree and Santa Claus.
Yeah. Maybe I should play Santa Claus. Last year, they made me play Scrooge for the kids. So that was,
That's not in fitting with your
oh,
character. I think you've got
no,
a rather generous spirit. I
thank
believe
you.
that you've been singing carols over the
Yes,
last few days.
yes.
Tell us about that.
I brought my bass rumble to the community choir concert, which happened 2 nights ago. That was wonderful, packed out. Frances, of course, Mrs. Craig was the star soprano in a very spangly dress, but I love it too. It's a fantastic thing. And then
Oh.
when you get to a certain age, it's also a great source of advice on back pain. So I love being in a choir.
Poor Phil is still suffering from
Yeah.
his back pain, but you have a diagnosis now, Phil.
Yes, I do. Before we started this program, Shauna and I were talking about slipped discs, which I have, and Shauna had, and was telling me how she got better, which is encouraging.
Yes, yes. Never have any trouble now. So
Very
it
good.
is possible. It is possible. Well, I'm excited to talk to you about this subject, Phil, because I think let's establish your credentials first because they are indeed very impressive. If you
Oh,
didn't know, Phil Craig is the author of these three fine books. So he finished off his trilogy on World War II actually this year with 1945 The Reckoning, and the first book was Finest Hour in collaboration with Tim Clayton, End of the Beginning, and then he did the last one in the trilogy all by himself, which was released this year. So I highly recommend all three. I confess, Phil, I've only read Finest Hour and 1945 The Reckoning. I have not read yet End of the Beginning, so that's definitely on my Christmas list. I'll
fantastic.
have to fill in the blanks there. But I wanted to invite Phil on because it's such an interesting subject. It's such an emotional subject, and it really is so interesting. What is it that resonates us about the concept of Christmas during World War II?
Well, actually, first of all, isn't it nice that we're having a conversation that isn't about anything horrible and controversial involving really bad
Yes,
behavior? And
yes,
it's so nice to do something a little bit celebratory. And I think
yeah,
in terms of Britain, and I'm very keen to know your perspective from Australia, certainly in terms of Britain, we have this very special place in our hearts for the Second World War. And I think we saw that really when the Queen died a couple of years ago. It's still very much a part of us. And we look back at it as a time of solidarity, a time of shared sacrifice. And we look at our world today and we say, well, it's not like that, is it? Well, the truth is, people were saying that in the 1950s and 60s too. It was a unique time, a very special time. And I think the absolute pinnacle of all that were the Christmases and especially the royal Christmases, the royal Christmas speeches. It was quite a new thing that the king would speak, and sometimes other members of the family. And wherever people were in the world, cattle stations in Australia, Canadian prairies, on ships, on planes, and even in prisoners of war camp, you could hear the say. The world there was no internet. It was very rare to experience something communal like that, and
yeah.
positive and loving, and that reminded you in the middle of a horrible war of all the good things about family life and faith and Christmas. So I think that's still in Britain. I don't know whether it's true in Australia, has a very special place in the national imagination.
I think it does. I think very definitely it does. I'm going to take us out of the World War II just to start for a minute because I think many people would have heard the story about the 1914 Christmas Day no man's land meetup between the English forces and the German forces, and it was something I read in a little golden book, when
Mm,
I was a,
mm,
a
mm.
toddler, and I think everyone's heard this story. So I went to the Imperial War Museum to check that it wasn't just a little golden book, that it was actually an accurate story. So I've got a slide, and I've got what what the Imperial Museum tell us, that on Christmas Eve 1914, men of the British Expeditionary Force heard German troops in the trenches opposite them singing carols and patriotic songs, and saw lanterns and small fir trees along the trenches. And then the following day, they met in no man's land, exchanged gifts, took photographs, and some played impromptu games of football, but they also took the time to bury casualties and also repair their trenches and their dugouts. But it's interesting, Phil, that by Boxing Day, meetings trickled off and they got back to the business of war. And I could imagine the awful feeling that if you were optimistic sort of soul and you ventured out on Boxing Day to have another game of footy in no man's land, and then you realised that hostilities had recommenced.
I mean, it was actually quite controversial at the time. And the army on both sides were quite shocked at what had happened. It only happened in a couple of places. And they made sure it never happened again. Special orders were given by both armies because I don't know why. I mean, I guess, the great fear is that people will so come to identify with this other person who's also maybe from a poor background like themselves, fighting on the command of some king or emperor or general, and have a kind of political consciousness that why are we killing each other? What's it all for?
Yeah.
So they clamped down on it hard, and it never happened.
Yes, they were terrified that it would stop them being brutal towards each other. Hello, Francis.
Hello.
Hi, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Mince pie.
Oh, lovely! I heard all about your sparkly dress and your carol singing.
Very sparkly. Yes, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, how lovely! That's gorgeous. I love your hat.
Oh yes,
with matching hats. We're on their attitude.
That would have made a perfect photograph when you did that. Then it was just absolutely gorgeous. That's fantastic.
I've been told off before by I think some of your audience for eating on camera, so I might leave that for a bit.
It's all right. It's our Christmas celebration. You're allowed to do whatever you like, and I love your Christmas mug. Now this is quite a romantic image, Phil. Beautiful. Under the mistletoe with your gas mask on.
Yes. Isn't that beautiful? It's funny. I'm planning a new book about the Second World War, and at the heart of it is a love story. And yesterday I met the child of the relationship that I'm writing about, and he said that his mother they were very unsentimental at that time. People often got engaged within weeks of meeting each other, and because they might get killed, it might be bombed, the guy might go off to war, the girl might go off to war. So a lot of these relationships run fast forward. And this particular chap says, my mother told the story that she sat down with him on their fifth date and said, to be honest, Peter, I do like you. There are several other chaps in the offing. So if you're thinking of making an offer, and he did, and they had a very happy marriage. They both survived the war. And yes, people took their chance of happiness when they could.
Wow. She must have known.
No, I think she did. But also,
and wanted to lock it down. Yeah.
She'd lost a brother already. He'd had a brother in a prisoner of war camp. Danger was ever present. So you took your chance of happiness when you could.
Yeah, I can understand that definitely. Now, this, of course, Christmas Eve in the middle of the Blitz was pretty much literally in the middle of the bombing, wasn't it? And I couldn't believe that in the air raid shelters, just reading these stats, over 1 million people regularly spent the night, and it had become so standardized that Christmas parties were actually celebrated in the shelters, and there was singing and skits and dancing and everything you could imagine in the actual shelters.
That's true. They tried to make it habitable. I mean, it was pretty grim. The sanitation was buckets, but people did try to make the best of it. The other thing I think you have to remember is an awful lot of these people will be looking at Christmas without their children for the first time. Thousands and thousands of children from the big cities have been evacuated, sent to the countryside, some sent abroad. So you're not only thinking of bombing, you're wondering where your kids are, you're missing them. They couldn't phone you up. They could maybe write you a letter. You could maybe write them a letter. You hope it would be delivered. It was such a very, very fraught time, and I think that's why those little moments of joy, especially around Christmas, meant so very much to people. There's a great story. I just written an article for the Daily Express about this, and there's a woman ambulance driver who always remembered taking people from a bombed out building up through the darkened streets of the bombed out city, and the 4 or 5 guys in the back of the ambulance suddenly started singing a carol. And she was so moved she had to stop the ambulance and kind of weep. And she never lost that memory. And just think, putting yourself there. That's why I love stories like that.
Yes, it's so moving, and it does remind you that real people were actually involved in this. I was fascinated to see King George VI and his wife Queen Elizabeth. This was their annual Christmas card in the middle of the Blitz, and of course Buckingham Palace had been bombed, and so they thought it apt to actually stand in front of the bombed palace, because it wasn't all sweetness and light. There was a lot of resentment, wasn't there, especially in the East End, where they had copped so much of this barrage, and until the palace was bombed they felt like they were the only ones really suffering, and this somehow brought the country even more together.
I think that's true. I mean, the Queen famously said, I feel I can look the East End in the face for the first time. It's funny. It's very easy to over sentimentalize this era, and there's been lots and lots of people trying to sort of debunk the Blitz spirit. But I'm not one of them. I think we should rebunk it. I think there was a lot of truth in the fact that people did find unusual levels of solidarity and looked out for each other and helped each other and their neighbours and their friends. Yes, there was crime. Yes, there was a bit of looting. People are people. But there was an enormous amount of community spirit. And I think that's why people look back on it so fondly. And also, I think it was very, very good for the royal family. I mean, before the war, some members of the royal family and other aristos, they had flirted with the Nazis, especially, of course, Edward, who became Duke of Windsor, and his wife, and Wallis Simpson. And even the Queen Mother was said to have had some sympathy for what the Germans were doing. But all of that was forgotten because they were so very good at just being around. They stayed in London and they visited all the bomb sites, and they made these remarkable broadcasts, actually, which I think did more than anything to kind of cement the relationship between the people of the whole Commonwealth, actually, I think. And they were listened to widely in America as well.
Yes, fascinating. And it was also fascinating to read about. There's a quote here, and it's quite amazing. This was in the newspaper at the time. Intimates of their majesties last week received cards on which the King and Queen were seen standing in front of the bomb portion of Buckingham Palace. This type of greeting a good many Britons cheerfully called a Blitzmas card.
Yeah.
And there was the most popular Christmas card that was sold in the shop, evidently it's sold like hotcakes, was one that said inside, "Wishing you anything but a Jerry Christmas."
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, they love to pun. They love to pun.
At an official level, from the very beginning of the war, people realised that Christmas was special. And, even when rationing was really tight, and it got tighter as the years passed, they always made sure there were extra goodies, extra supplies, especially things for making cakes and wrapping paper. And more people working in the post office. People were taken, like the Home Guard, to help with delivering the mail, just to keep that sense of normality going as much as they could at Christmas time.
That's wise. That's wise, isn't it? This was Queen Mary's Christmas card. She chose a more traditional thing, but she wrote in hers, rather than a pun about the Jerrys, she wrote in hers, "They'll always be in England." So that was her sort of defiant statement. And this one had really impacted me. This was Christmas Eve in a bomb shelter that was under the Camden Town Brewery.
Wow.
Yeah. And it looks so surreal, doesn't it? It just looks...
Well, London is full of these old viaducts, even more then. There's still plenty of them now. And it was a favoured place for people who didn't want to go underground. They go into these viaducts. And, of course, every now and again, they got a direct hit killed. Wow. So it was a riskier option, but you had fresh air. It was a little bit easier to get food and drink to them. But,
right.
Right.
Well, that's a lesson in itself. Don't go into a viaduct. I mean, ultimately, how safe were the bomb shelters like this one that were right down deep?
They were pretty safe. I mean, there were examples of people dying actually tragically in crushers, like the escalator or the stairs, so many people rushing in at once, they fell on top of each other. That happened a few times. But by and large, and there was also one direct hit, I think, on an underground station in Bethnal Green. But that, it was the safest place, because they're very deep. London Underground, it's hundreds of feet down, most of it.
Right. I've never been in the London Underground. I'm going to have to do that. Now, guess who that little boy is?
I think it's a royal. Is it the future?
No, it's Winston Churchill's grandson.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And he was given a book of nursery rhymes at a Christmas party at the Allied Naval Officers' Children's Party held at Admiralty House, December 1942.
So that'd be Pamela Churchill's son, with Pamela and Randolph. Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I thought that was really cute.
Churchill, of course, was a very sentimental man, but he was occasionally quite a ruthless man as well. But he had an enormous capacity for sentimentality and for bursting into tears all the time. And he made some very memorable Christmas speeches as well, which we might get to some of those later.
I am going to get onto that because Phil has written a brilliant article that's going to be published, I think, Christmas Eve in the UK. And he gave it to me to read. And he's written some wonderful things about Churchill, which I'm going to get him to share with you just in a little bit. Now, this was fascinating because GIs, of course, when Americans joined the war, were invited into British homes for Christmas dinner. And it was quite a popular thing to do because they used to bring lovely things, food and extra rations with them.
Well, the Americans, of course, and the Canadians, actually, were well known for being, better paid, having all these lovely goodies. Their food supplies were better, and they were, some of them would share it happily with the British people that they came to know and they stayed with. There was a kind of romantic and sexual side to this too, and a lot of, the famous phrase overpaid, oversexed, and over here. And a lot of English girls found themselves very much drawn to these handsome, healthy young men who could give them presents and treats. And that caused some resentment at times and fights in pubs. But by and large, I think people loved having the Americans around.
Yeah, I imagine so. And I've heard of so many wartime romances as well. And there's, of course, been documentaries, haven't there, about British brides going back to the US after the war and that huge adjustment they had to make. This was interesting. It was about war savings, and there were all this advice because they didn't really want people to spend money at Christmas. They wanted to put it into war bonds and war savings and things. So there was all these instructions on how to make shiny ornaments for your tree using tin can lids and all sorts of things like that. It was fascinating.
I looked into this a little for my article, and I found this thing: you can make a lovely rag doll out of an old vest. If your Christmas present is made out of Granddad's vest.
Oh dear! As long as it wasn't something out of Granddad's undies.
Oh well, gosh, I could tell you. We go back to the Americans. My favourite World War II joke. Rationing was very tight, and there were lots of complaints about the quality of the clothing that people had. And you could save your coupons. I think it was 2.5 years for a man to save enough points to buy one suit, 4 months for a single shirt. And there were continual complaints about the quality of knicker elastic, right?
Right.
And there was a famous joke talking about the popularity of American boyfriends. They said, "Oh yeah, my wife, her drawers, they're so badly made, one yank and they're off." Oh dear. Clean down tone a little bit.
That's funny. I love that. That's really great.
There's lots of funny naughty jokes from the Second World War.
That's really good. This is a Christmas stocking, and it's authentically from 1941, and all the gifts and everything was made from the sort of poor quality war paper, and it's quite clever. All those little, the little
Lovely, isn't it?
tiger and everything is all made by someone lovingly, and that's actually in the Imperial War Museum. You can actually see that Christmas stocking. I thought that was really, really lovely. And of course they had to conserve paper, so they said here, this was interesting: no retailer shall provide any paper for the packing or wrapping of goods excepting foodstuffs. So they were allowed to wrap food in paper. Caused all sorts of problems because when presents were delivered, they could see what it was.
Do you know, that's so lovely. I mean, there are craft shops in nice parts of London where stuff like that would go for like £25 each. I mean, it's so beautifully made, isn't it?
Yes. Yes,
Care and the
superb.
attention. It's absolutely lovely. I mean,
Yeah, and how lovely it's been preserved and donated to the museum. You were saying about the post office workers, and they were saying that there was such a shortage, particularly in those first few Christmases, that they had a real trouble getting the parcels and extra letters out. And you were right, yeah, they called on the Home Guard to actually carry the mail. And also they had trouble even, of course, with the railways during the Blitz carrying the mail
yes, of
from
course.
one end of the UK to the other. So
The other
really
thing,
everything was affected.
the other thing that happened at Christmas time actually was that parcels and hampers would come in from the Commonwealth, especially from Australia and Canada. People would gather together in little committees to help their cousins across the sea. And the Australians, the Canadians, the New Zealanders, others were so generous. And they would send sometimes so much, it was like a whole street would share one hamper, tins of ham and really hard to get foods. And they were allowed, because, shipping was at a premium and there were U-boats and we needed all sorts of fuel and things, but they really could see how this would help bind, all the allies together by making space. And it also made people, I think, in Australia and elsewhere feel part of the war effort themselves because they weren't being
Yeah.
bombed and they weren't having rationing, but they could sort of help the people that were, many of whom, would have been relations of theirs, probably.
Yeah, I spoke to my mum about this actually, and she remembers my pa actually building an air raid shelter in the backyard, but she was very little, but that's pretty much all she really remembers. And she thought it was great because it was like a new cubby house or something. She had no idea of the seriousness of the whole thing. Now you've
Australia
got
was
a lot.
bombed. Australia was bombed a couple of times, certainly in Darwin and around there.
Darwin, yeah, not they were down the other end, so they were okay. Now, in your article, you actually brought up a really interesting fact about the then Princess Elizabeth and her making her first broadcast, which was actually to all the evacuated children, I believe. Tell us about that.
It was actually a couple of weeks before Christmas, but it was so touching that she'd never done it before. She'd never spoken before on the radio, and it was live, all over the world. Can you imagine that? You're talking to people all over the world at once. You're 14 years old. It was a very special. I'm trying to find the words actually she used. Let me see if I've got them in my article here. It was about children really and evacuated children, and that's right, and how she wanted to send them best wishes for the joy of Christmas and to know that everybody was sharing the same dangers together and that they all prayed together to have better Christmases in the future. It's a sentiment. I
Yeah,
don't think she wrote it herself, but it was very well delivered. And it really, these words really did mean a lot to people. So much so that
yeah,
when you read diaries of the time, and I've read a lot, so many people do refer to those broadcasts, especially the very first few from the King, because then most people probably never heard his voice before, or maybe they'd heard it once or twice at Christmas before. And
yeah,
yet suddenly here he is speaking to the whole world about something that's very directly about them, affecting
yeah,
their lives and the lives of
yeah.
people they loved all over the world. Incredible stuff.
It is incredible. I wonder if you can actually hear the broadcast from Princess Elizabeth. I wonder, is that
I
anywhere?
couldn't
Do you
find
know?
it. I had a listen actually. I couldn't find it, but I did find some wonderful words from King George the Sixth, which I found very touching. And this was the Christmas of 1943. And I know that people were listening to this on HMS Belfast, which went into battle on Boxing Day in the Arctic Circle against the massive German battleship. So they're all ready to go into battle. They've all got their special anti-flash clothing on. It's the Arctic. It's freezing cold. And this guy said these words made me feel connected to everybody back home. And this is what he said. The Queen and I send our Christmas greetings to each one of you all the world over. Some of you will listen to me, I'm sure, on board your ships, or maybe on board your aircraft, or maybe as you prepare for battle in the jungles of Asia or the peaks of Italy. Some may be even listening in a hospital, lying sick and wounded. But wherever you are, I am sure will be with distant places and those that you love and those you hope to be again. And I'd like to feel that my words can bind us all as one company for a few moments this Christmas day. I mean, isn't that amazing?
Yeah. That's beautiful. And
And it's
that there
really
is
lovely.
That's actually Belfast there.
Yeah. So they were listening
Yeah.
to it later as Belfast. They were probably listening to it in Queensland. They were listening to it in,
Yeah.
all over
Yeah.
the world at once.
Have you
Binding
been
together.
there, Phil? Have you been on
Actually,
HMS Belfast?
my book was launched. I did a talk on VE Day on that ship, about my book.
Was it really?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Oh,
It was at sunset
wow.
too, just like that. It's amazing.
Oh, gosh, that's so poignant. And that must have meant so much to you that you could do that.
I was very honoured to be asked. I mean, I've got a good relationship with the War Museum. I've done a few things for them. And yeah, it was a special party. There was live music. There were people dancing. The jitterbug. Everybody was in costume of the period. Lots of drink and lovely
Great.
food. And then yeah, I got to do a sort of half-hour talk about the book, and I sold a few copies, so it made Phil very happy. But it was a lovely sentimental moment for me too, because
That quote that you just read, was that Peter Brooke-Smith?
well, Peter Brooke-Smith was listening to the King. What I read was the King's
Okay.
words.
You read the King.
But
Yeah.
he
Of
said
course.
that
Sorry. Yeah.
he said, I was sat huddled up in my goon skin and balaclava, waiting to go into battle, and suddenly listening to those words brought me close to my families, as I knew they'd be listening to those same words at that same moment.
Yeah. Oh, it's so poignant, isn't it? Now, this fascinated me in your article, and it's getting on to Winston Churchill. Now, that Hong Kong had just fallen, and he wasn't even aware of that because he was on his way over to the USA. Christmas Eve, he decided to invite himself to the White
Yeah, he
House.
just basically said, I'm coming.
Yes, yes, and it was all, of course, to build a relationship with the brand new allies, and it's just absolutely fascinating. And there you have Franklin D. Roosevelt with Winston Churchill, but look at the menu there; it was quite extravagant. And of course, Winston Churchill would have been well and truly in the rationing period, particularly throughout the Blitz, and so he must have thought all his Christmases had literally come at once when he saw that menu.
I think, to be fair, the high officials in Churchill got rather better than the normal ration. But of course, and it was a very significant moment, this, and it's the way that Churchill, throughout his life, blended the personal and the political. There were lots of issues with America, and there were throughout the war. Roosevelt's own party was really quite anti-British. Lots of Irish Americans who were very big in the Democratic Party were very anti-British for all sorts of reasons we can understand. And they were very suspicious of empire. So to go over there and to forge these very personal connections made a lot of sense. And he was just very good at working the press with his cigars and his photo ops. And he would always was happy to send himself up and make jokes. And then he invited himself to the White House, and he was asked by Roosevelt to make a speech when they lit the Christmas trees, an annual event in Washington. And he came out with words that had people crying all around him. He said,
Yes, that was so moving. Do you want to tell us what they were?
well, I'll try to do my best bit of Churchill. I feel a sense of unity and fraternal association, which added to the kindliness of your welcome, convinces me that I have a right to sit at your fireside and share your Christmas joys. Let our children have their night of fun and laughter, that these same children shall not be robbed of their inheritance and their joys in the future.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
he's
it
just had a
just,
way
it
with
was,
words, that man.
yes, he did. And it was at that moment, you say in your article, that he just won their hearts,
I think it's
hearts
fair
and
to say he
minds.
did. There were
Yeah.
always tensions and pressures, and I write about those in my books. But the bottom line is, they became very close allies and helped each other a lot. And you only get one chance to make a first impression, and his
Yeah.
was at Christmas, and he milked it for every drop of sentiment that he could.
Yes. And of course, he had his battle suit on, his famous overalls.
His romper
That
suit, they called.
always wore that. Yeah.
He also
And
turned
this,
up naked. And don't forget, it's on this same visit.
yes.
He's getting dressed after his bath, and Roosevelt knocks on the door, comes in, and he's stark naked. And Roosevelt says, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Winston." And he famously said, "The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom has nothing to hide from the President of the United States of America."
That's classic, isn't
And he
it?
was very odd about his body. he had a history of sort of wandering around semi-dressed or in a not very
Really?
well tied dressing gown. It was something about him. Nobody ever said it was like he was sort of trying it on with people. He wasn't like that at all. He was just kind
No.
of furiously unembarrassed about himself.
Right. He had a very healthy attitude to his body.
He did. You're quite right.
Yeah. Well, that's good to see. Is it true that he smoked cigars in the bath?
Oh yeah, and drank whiskey in the bath. And well, he drank pretty much all day.
Yeah, was he permanently pissed, Phil?
Yeah, well, he famously said, "I have taken more out of alcohol than alcohol has taken out of me." It was his fuel.
Yeah.
He would stay up late at night brainstorming with his favored kind of cronies and advisors, and they'd talk and drink and drink and talk and smoke until 2 or 3 in the morning, and then he would
Wow.
crash out. But normally from about 11 o'clock in the morning, he'd have a drink on. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
drink steadily
Wow.
during the day. And it just kind of kept him going. I mean, he lived to a ripe old age on it.
Yes. Yes. So it obviously was good for him. Anyway, this is the Winston Churchill bedroom
Oh,
in the
wow.
White House. I'm sure it's changed now, but that was actually the room that he stayed in for his stay. Do you know how long he stayed for, Phil? Was
I
it just
don't
a
actually.
few nights?
No, I think it was like 10 days or so. I mean, I think there was lots of
Right.
heavy political meetings going on, as well
Right.
as, just kind of hanging out and lighting the Christmas lights. If
Yeah.
you love Churchill and anything to do with Churchill and sentiment, there's a wonderful woman, Catherine Carter, who is the curator, I think, of Chartwell, Churchill's family house. And if you find her on Twitter, she's showing lovely pictures of the decoration. Every year they decorate it in a style based on the way that Churchill and Clementine, his wife, used to decorate the house. Catherine Carter. And they are
lovely.
beautiful. They are beautiful pictures.
Did Clementine actually go with him to the White House? Was it
I don't
wives
think
as
he
well?
did. I don't think on this trip he did. She did. I'm not entirely sure.
Right.
Later,
Okay. And that is it. That's all the pictures I have. But I was really interested to read in your article when you said strangely that it was actually the last Christmas that was really felt the most, that people felt was the hardest to cope with.
it really was. And things take a slightly darker turn. In 1944, there's D-Day, there's the liberation of Paris, there's a sense that this war might genuinely be over by Christmas. And then there's a series of military reverses. There's the famous Bridge Too Far story, this failed attempt to get across the Rhine. And then the Germans, utterly to everybody's surprise, launched this Battle of the Bulge, their final offensive against the Americans and the British at Christmas time. Leads to a wonderful moment of American military history where they're besieged in a place called Bastogne, and the Germans call upon the American commander to surrender. And he replies in a very famous cable or a note to the German commander, nuts. Signed, the American commander. One word answer, nuts. So things are going bad all of a sudden, and there's the Blitz is back. There's bombing, not bombing, rockets that you can't see coming. These V2 rockets and the other ones, the new ones. People are dying again. There's some really bad attacks in the end of 44. I think in a Woolworths, like 200 people die. So people are scared. And I think, there is a sense that solidarity is fraying. There's a little bit of a crime wave. And there are even people targeting children, taking their toys from children because they can flog them on the black market to other people wanting presents at Christmas time. So people are quite upset about this.
Yeah.
And it is a very tough Christmas, the Christmas of 1944.
Yeah. I remember reading in Marion Crawford's book, The Little Princesses, and she was saying about what have they called those bombs? The bugs.
The doodle bugs were the V1,
doodle bugs.
and then
Oh,
the
right.
rockets were the V2, and the rockets were the ones you couldn't see coming.
Yes, she said they were actually at Windsor, and this happened, and she describes actually throwing herself on top of Princess Elizabeth.
Wow.
And she really thought that was going to be the end of them all, but it actually kept going and, went into a nearby village. But, just really scary, shocking stuff. It would have been
It was a frightening time. And again, people were thinking, is this war ever going to end? Are we ever going to see? This is now 4 or 5 years. It's the 5th Christmas of the war. People are so missing that their loved ones are fighting abroad or in prisoner of war camps. And the black market's becoming a real worry. They're trying to crack down on it. But, if people who had access to money inside the ration, I came across a lovely poem. Can I read it?
Yes.
This was from the 1944 Christmas edition of the New Statesman magazine. A grace for a black market turkey. Let us with a knowing wink praise the Lord for food and drink, who his choicest gifts doth send upon them with cash to spend. Praise him who, with broadest mind, saves us all from being fined, who, by giving us thick skin, spares us consciousness of sin.
Oh, that was brilliant. Oh, fantastic.
That was the poem
This
from
is just great. And I was also interested to read that in Sandringham, quite early on in the first year, all the fields were actually ploughed and vegetables were planted.
Yes, yes.
And, it became such a source, a food source. And I guess that happened everywhere, didn't it?
Dig for Victory was one of the great campaigns of the war, and it also meant that ordinary people could feel they were doing something good. So yeah, grass verges, even the strips of land between roads, and anything that was like derelict, people went out and they grew cabbages, they grew carrots, anything they could, because food supplies were short, and of course a lot of it was imported, and every ton you could save of imported food meant less. You didn't need to have a ship, and less ships were sunk by U-boats, etc. It was a national effort. And I think that's why national events like Christmas just really always stand out. When people start telling you their stories of the war, they invariably revolve around either their birthdays or Christmas.
Yeah, those occasions of where you feel the love and you want your family's love and you miss them the most, I guess. So what about you and your family this Christmas? How are you going to spend Christmas?
Well, we're going to be decorating the house, I think, tomorrow or the day after. Get the tree. Last year, I don't know if you remember, my mother-in-law Jennifer. Those who follow my podcast, she had a fall on a holiday in Madeira, fractured her pelvis in a pretty bad way. So she had Christmas basically in her bedroom around the corner, and we took food to her and sat around the bed, and that's when I played Scrooge, because Francis, being brilliant, wrote a little Christmas play. And our grandchildren, Jennifer's great-grandchildren, performed it. And then we sang a carol or two. And it was very moving. It was very lovely. In a way, I suppose, a bit like wartime Christmas. You make the best out of privations.
Yeah.
But this year, of course, she's back on her feet, rumbling up and down the streets on her walker. So we're going to get a massive gathering of the clans. All the grandkids will be here. Big celebrations. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, that's lovely.
We haven't talked about Australia enough in this episode.
Oh, well, I must admit, I'm probably a little royal obsessed and a little UK obsessed, because once I got onto that Imperial Museum website, which I encourage everyone to look at, I'm going to link it down below in the description after this, I just got completely captivated and taken away. So we might have to do another episode next year on Australian Christmas. We might have to do it Christmas in July or something, Phil.
Well, we could do something on Anzac Day, maybe, which is a great celebration.
That would be interesting. Yeah, I was completely captivated by Winston Churchill and the whole bit. Yeah, totally taken in by all that. Thank you to everybody for joining us. We hope you have a very Merry Christmas. Someone said here, Danielle said, Phil's so knowledgeable. And there's lots of love heart eyes.
Oh, that's nice to know. Well, it's nice to talk about something positive, isn't it? Rather than whinging on about stuff, which I tend to do on my podcast.
Well, thank you for joining us. We hope we will see you in 2026. And thanks for sharing your Christmas knowledge with us, with your Blitzmas knowledge today.
It was absolutely my pleasure. And thank you to everybody who's watched and listened, not just today, but all year.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you again with Phil in 2026. Bye. Bye, everyone. Bye.